Joshua on Al FM podcast.
The sound of Arabia.
Hello, everybody. This is Joshua of Al and I have with us our very dear guest, Nouf Marwaai, joining us. She is essentially Saudi Arabia's most well-known yogi. Hello and welcome, Nouf.
Hello, Joshua.
Or should I say namaste?
Namaste.
So, do you go by yogi, Nouf? Or...
Okay, so my title in yoga is Yoga Acharya, means the master of masters.
Yoga Acharya.
Yes.
The
it's
master
a high
of masters.
level.
Okay, very nice.
I have another title, Padma Shri. I received the fourth highest civilian honor from the President of India himself.
Wow.
And it has a title, for yoga.
Hey, what is it called?
Padma Shri.
Padma Shri. Okay.
Means the noble person.
Thank you so much for making so much time for us, Padma Shri. And so, when did you start the committee?
The committee, it was established by the Ministry of Sports and the Olympic Committee in 2021, 16th of May 2021, but yoga journey was way before.
Okay, can you talk to me about that journey? Like, what led you to yoga?
I started practicing yoga exactly 1998 because I was diagnosed with a rheumatic autoimmune disease that is called lupus erythematosus. And that time, I was an active person. I liked doing sports and I liked being active. But the doctors told my parents that I cannot be under the sun and I cannot do certain activities. So that time, I started learning yoga. I was 18 years old. And because of my illness that specific year, I was not studying because I was so weak and underweight. So my parents decided that I won't go to school before my health improved. So that year, I learned yoga from a book. And I started practicing yoga and my health improved, my well-being. So I had symptoms. The symptoms I had that prevented me from being able to continue in school were like, I would wake up and I wouldn't be able to move. I'll have spasms and stiffness in my joints, in my muscles. I also had an anxiety because I was young and I didn't know what's wrong with my health. And so when I started practicing yoga, I improved. My sleeping improved due to my anxiety and panic attacks. I had sleeping problems. The palpitation issue improved. My anxiety levels went down. I had more mobility and flexibility in my joints and in my body to move better, especially in the morning. And I started being able to do things in my life, like read the book like a normal human being instead of being in pain.
Yoga gave you like a holistic kind of mitigation strategy for
body
some of your
and
symptoms.
Mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stay tuned as we ask Saudi Arabia's premier yoga expert to explain the essence of yoga. When we're back on Artifact, get ready for an enlightening discussion.
Artifact with Joshua on Al FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
Can you tell me a little bit? Let's not assume. I know that you're Saudi Arabia's premier yoga expert. As you've mentioned before, you've even been recognized by the President of India for your expertise and in your mastery of yoga. But essentially, can you explain to the audience and to me as well, what is yoga? What is it really?
It's like you said, a holistic wellness practice that started in India more than 5,000 years ago. Some archaeologists found stuff dated back to more than 8,000 years ago. So ancient people in India maybe found the system because they used to practice meditation. And this system developed over years with body positions And it's all inspired by nature. That's why yoga positions are called after certain animals, or tree pose, mountain pose, and all these names, but they're in Sanskrit. And it developed over time. There is a lot of lineages and traditions of yoga and different yoga schools. And just
so
because
essentially different types of is it there's taekwondo and there's boxing and there's karate? Is it that kind of difference? Is there that kind of different approaches, I guess? Is it like a martial art?
Different approach. Yes, like if you take, for example, Hatha Yoga, the traditional original type, people just practice the positions slow, and there is a gap between positions. Means you perform the asana, we call it an asana, the body pose, and then you stop. But you have to regulate your breath, and you have to have a holding time of it. But when you look at another type, that is Vinyasa Yoga or Ashtanga Vinyasa, is more of a flow from a position to another position, and then you break between after 2, 3, 5 positions. So it's more powerful. And it's just amazing. There is yin yoga, for example, where you can stay in one position for 1 minute or 2 minutes, things like that.
Amazing. What about how prevalent yoga is or was in Saudi Arabia? I'm sure when you started, yoga might not have been very prevalent.
I actually started teaching yoga 2004 in Jeddah. Some people actually knew what is yoga, but there was no yoga schools. And when I started promoting yoga in the media, written, radio, TV, and I started going on regular TV programs to educate people about it, brought different courses, and actually, one of the things that I always wished to have is have a license for yoga studios to open as a yoga studio. And this dream came true in November 2017 when yoga was listed as a sports activity. And people are able now to issue a license to practice yoga. And I'm proud that I worked with the standards committee in Ministry of Sports that time for yoga regulations until 2019. We worked on more regulations, and then by 2021 a whole committee was established because the growth of the numbers of yoga practitioners and teachers in Saudi Arabia grew bigger. It's tens of thousands of people practice yoga.
Wow. And how prevalent is yoga in Saudi Arabia today? I've noticed on social media, there's even yoga influencers that are native Saudis. I've seen people come from all over the world.
We have yoga gold medal holders in Saudi Arabia. We have a Saudi national team for yoga that won 5 medals last year in Nepal in Mount Everest yoga championship. So we have people practice yoga just for wellness. We have people who mastered yoga to an international level. We have people who are practicing yoga as athletes. So it is something. It is really a big thing in Saudi Arabia.
I really wanted to ask you, so yoga essentially came from South Asia, in a country we call today India. And it was well known probably sometime in the 1800s. It reached Europe and North America and then became very popular in the 1960s, 70s in the United States. And then, I guess, made a full circle back eastwards towards, let's say, Saudi Arabia and the greater Middle East.
Yeah.
And I've noticed from my very humble research, I'm not a yogi like you. I don't think there's any post that I could actually hold, to be quite frank. Just to be very, very honest with you.
Trust me.
I couldn't.
You can.
I couldn't. But maybe with your wisdom and with your expertise, you'd be able to coach me into holding a pose one day. When we're back, we'll discover Saudi contributions to this ancient practice and how it's thriving in new cultural contexts. Stay tuned on Artifact.
Artifact with Joshua on Al-Ula FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
So from my humble research, I've learned that Saudi Arabia really adopted, or the people who are practicing yoga today aren't really necessarily getting it from the direct source in South Asia. They're getting it from westernized sources. So what I want to know is, since we have people who are winning competitions in Nepal, which is the genesis of yoga, have there been any Saudi contributions to yoga on the way?
Yes. So there are a few things, actually. Let me tell you that we are still in Saudi Arabia followers of the traditional yoga that is more of an Indian, let's say, traditional school, even though there is westernized types of yoga, but it's still connected to the essence of yoga. So what we did when the Saudi Yoga Committee was established, and the first International Yoga Day after that establishment, in 2021, we signed an MOU with the Ministry of Ayush, which is the Ministry of Yoga in India, for our standards, because we created standards that suit the practices and the culture and the system in Saudi Arabia. Now, we did not change anything in the essence of practice or anything. We only classified and picked what is more of the interest of people here, and which is really direct connection to health and well-being, and also the yoga competitions, which is called yoga asana sports. That is the type of yoga. And of course, we're working now on the rehabilitation, or what they call yoga therapy. That is a type you educate instructors how to teach people with different health issues to practice, to be able for them to practice and enjoy yoga, even though if they have a health issue, because yoga positions can be hard and they have effect on the spine and the nervous system. So each health issue, there is a certain way of teaching people, even if it's just an anxiety or panic attacks. So we have a good contribution, actually. Our standards are now in demand by other countries.
Wow.
They want us to guide them through how to establish their yoga committees or federations to be able to spread yoga in their countries with nice, highly designed qualifications that assures the quality of the services they get from yoga teachers and yoga centers. We also contributed in the G20 last year with the Indian presidency, and they had the theme for that G20 taken from yoga philosophy and ancient philosophy. It is a phrase that means the whole world is one family, and that is actually in one of the ancient books yoga is based on, Vasudeva Kutumbakam. So we were invited, I was invited to represent Saudi Arabia in that working group, and our message was yoga for development and peace between nations.
Wow, so there's something like cultural diplomacy going here. So you are a part of the cultural diplomacy apparatus, even if it's on a sports level. Yeah, you are essentially you are. What you're saying to me is you're helping build cultural, athletic, therapeutic, medicinal bridges between Saudi Arabia and countries like Nepal and then India and perhaps Sri Lanka. And
there's in Nepal, there is in Indonesia, India. They have tournaments, and it is amazing. And then there is the other type we just practice for health and well-being that we're working to spread.
So I also want to ask you about, I want to know, what is the reaction of people to yoga in Saudi Arabia?
It was amazing teaching in 2004. People would ask me, first question, does this conflict with religion? I explained to them that is not. And here is the confusion people have. So yoga is a spiritual practice because it calms your mind, your body, and what I studied is clinical psychology. So if you look what happens in your brain when you meditate or practice a slow practice with focus on breathing, you actually activate your parasympathetic nervous system, your brain chemicals improve, and you feel that quietness, calmness in your mind that makes you maybe more able to feel yourself in different level and your spirit. And that's why they keep saying yoga is body, mind, and spirit practice, or the soul, because it makes you feel closer to yourself and it teaches you about yourself. So if you look at it, people cannot differentiate between different types of yoga that maybe mixes other spiritual practices. We here in Saudi Arabia practice the traditional types for body, mind, for a good, let's say, recipe for health and well-being as a holistic approach, body, mind, and soul. But we also focus on the regulations and on actually classifying these practices, what is actually really useful and what is not original, because there are new different yoga styles and they might be harmful practices.
And that makes that makes perfect sense, because the Indian approach to philosophy for thousands of years hasn't been like, we think this is useful, therefore we want to incorporate it into our spiritual, do you know what I'm saying, our spiritual reality. What they've done, which is the opposite of what a lot of cultures did around the world when they were developing their world outlook, what they did in India is whatever they saw having so much usefulness to people, right? Like I might declare that, okay, this rock is useful, but this is only my perception. So I said, this rock is useful, guys, let's incorporate this into our worldview, right?
Yeah.
Instead, they, in South Asia, their approach has always been, what's useful? Okay, so we have this precedence of yoga being useful. For instance, bovines, cows being useful. So let us incorporate these types of things into our worldview in a way that people can revere the existence of these things in our lives and realize the usefulness from not only because of a dogmatic approach, but also because they can realize what the material value of practicing those things or keeping those things are. So it's not simply because what people think, it's about what people lived, what experience is being shared. And I think that approach is a very rational approach that doesn't require any sort of dedication or conflict with any specific worldview or religion.
No, it's not. It's actually valid. Otherwise, it wouldn't have lived for all these years and actually flourished, not only in India, but outside India. And one thing, the gurus of yoga in the past, like in ancient India, they wouldn't teach anyone that is not committed. Yoga for them meant discipline. So in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, this text was written 600 BC. It's the first text of yoga. It starts with one phrase. Ada Yog Anushasanam means here now begins the discipline of yoga. So if you're not disciplined to continue learning and commit to this to develop your life, your mind, your body, you're not going to attend that again with that guru. They would ask you to leave if you weren't serious about respecting the science, because they know how helpful it is.
Yoga is a very deep topic. I'm very pleasantly surprised that you're able to bring us down to the very nitpick details. But you brought us to another question that I wanted to ask you. When we're back on Artifact, discover how yoga enthusiasts in Saudi Arabia find balance and peace in a fast-paced environment. Learn their secrets to managing stress and cultivating mindfulness.
Artifact with Joshua on Al-Ula FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
And we're back on Artifact. So how can, we were talking about dedication and discipline. How can yoga help individuals manage stress and cultivate mindfulness, particularly in a fast-paced, growing environment like Saudi Arabia?
Yeah. So in the 1912, a yoga guru who was called Sri Krishnamacharya wanted to learn. He learned yoga in text and all philosophy, so he wanted to learn the physical practice. So when he went to that person in top in the Himalayas in Nepal, he didn't accept him. He actually told him, you have to stay here 8 years with me, learn everything, and then I'm going to allow you to go. So after he learned, he asked him, what can I give you as a guru dakshina? Means how can I pay for your knowledge? He said, you pay me by teaching yoga to city dwellers. And that was still the time where India was under colony. So he told him, I'm a professor. How can I do that? So that guru wanted to bring back yoga to the Indian street where people are busy. They call them households. So they started teaching the style that is called Vinyasa Yoga, the sequence I was telling you about, that you can practice in your day, half an hour, 1 hour, 45 minutes, maximum 2 hours, at least 3 times a week to get the benefits. Just commit to that time of your day to get the benefits and the fruits, and then you can carry on your life. You don't have to really stop everything in your life and just do yoga like other gurus would do in the past.
And that's great advice for people who are just trying to start, people who are beginners, essentially.
Yes.
No, if you're saying it doesn't have to be daily. It could be twice a week, 3 times a week.
Yes, minimum twice a week. And even if you can dedicate just 20 minutes or half an hour for that, you have done a miracle for yourself.
No, you know that Al-Ula is becoming a hotspot for global enthusiasts and experts and researchers in yoga.
Yes.
And Al-Ula is the host of the Al-Ula Wellness Festival, which will return later in 2024. And it's continuing Al-Ula's commitment to being a refuge of restoration and relaxation. It's an annual gathering which will once again celebrate holistic living, transformative practices, and the spirit of community. What are the synergies between yoga and wellness? I mean, we heard about how yoga helped you specifically, how it helps certain people, but as a holistic approach to wellness, where are the synergies between yoga and wellness?
Okay. I'm going to answer this question in 2 parts. The first part is yoga and wellness. The second part, how Al-Ula is actually the best place for this. First, yoga is connected to wellness because the main holistic theory for health and well-being actually came thousands of years ago from the yoga philosophy. So yoga looks at the human being as 5 layers: body, mind, intellect, energy, emotions, and happiness, which is inside your heart. And you have to go from the outside, which is your body, the outer frame, until the inside of your body. So the practice of positions, breathing, meditation, and relaxation at the end of the session that actually calms your mind. And what is actually wellness? Wellness is the integrity between your body, mind, and spirit, of course. So yoga is actually the perfect, let's say, resembling of wellness themes and wellness practices. And if you look at all ancient wellness, natural medicine, healing remedies, they were born in nature, in places that are ancient civilizations like Al-Ula. So Al-Ula resembles the ancient historic civilization and the nature. So there is a system of medicine that is connected to yoga that is called naturopathy. And there is Ayurveda, the Indian ancient medicine. So naturopathy uses sand, mud, sun, air as a healing power. But it should be a pure nature, just like what we see today in Al-Ula. It's like pure nature, and it's like so ancient, and it calms your soul. So when you bring wellness practices, healing remedies, yoga to a place like Al-Ula, you're actually doing it in the heart of a healing environment. That is really something I appreciate to myself.
I didn't realize
I look
that
at it
at all, Nouf. Like now that you're saying this, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense because yoga was probably founded somewhere in the Harappan civilization, which was on the Indus River, and it was a crossroads for that time, for that geography. And Al-Ula is also just as ancient and was also a crossroads, and so that makes perfect sense. Actually, what you're saying,
exactly. between Persia, India, and the Gulf. And actually, there is this mixture of civilizations. So I really see it as the best project ever. And I think it just started, but people will keep maybe wondering about how this is an amazing thing. Wellness in Al-Ula, it's actually the right place.
I completely agree. And you talked a little bit about environment. So when we're back, we'll explore environmental consciousness in Al-Ula's sustainable development efforts, right here on Artifact.
Artifact with Joshua on Al-Ula FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
And so I want to know, since Al-Ula is committed to sustainable development, how can yoga contribute to environmental awareness and conscious living?
That's my best part. So as I told you, in the yoga philosophy, there is this element that is called Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the 8 limbs of yoga. If you read clearly, carefully through the 8 limbs of yoga, you will find that they are just exactly the sustainable development goals we always talk about, the SDGs.
So you're telling me the SDGs are actually inspired by ancient yogis.
Wow. So, yeah, if you look at it, yoga, what is actually, if you look at yogis, they all respect nature. They have different concepts and philosophy of life. They hate waste. They hate hurting the environment, because this is the first thing they learn in the class when they start learning yoga.
Ahimsa.
And they treat
the very first thing.
Ahimsa, no violence whatsoever.
No violence.
Old yogis used to walk with a broom to just remove even ants. They don't want to step on them because they don't want to hurt the environment.
There's Jains living in India today. They still
Jainism.
do it. Yes, they still do it.
Yep, and even a lot of practices.
Yes.
In the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, saving food. It's actually one of the conducts is not to waste food and to fast and not to eat too much, not because you will gain weight, but because you cannot eat what is yours and what is for the others. You have to always eat little to not overuse the environment sources. So there is a lot of teachings in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras and in the yoga philosophy that connects you directly to nature. Especially ahimsa, like you mentioned. Ahimsa is like no violence whatsoever. You cannot even cut trees. You cannot hurt anything in the environment except just for your living.
Yes. Yes. I'm actually having a moment of inspiration, and I'm doing
You need to study yoga.
Yeah, I'm doing some mind yoga. Like, I feel like I'm having a mental yoga session.
There is mental yoga.
Yeah,
it's called Gyan yoga.
Wow, you guys got everything covered. There's no inventing anything new.
Gyan yoga is about studying wisdom and universal philosophy, how to respect universe, how to live, how to understand. Yeah.
You know, that I'm just sitting here in the studio and thinking with you and talking to you, and I really do feel like even talking about yoga is therapeutic.
It is. So that's why, again, we have discovered in yoga, it's called satsang. So whenever we used to travel to India to study, we are big groups. People are from all over the world. So after dinner, we all sit with the teacher and discuss these philosophies. It's called satsang. Satsang means a conversation between people who are alike or who are good, having a very fruitful conversation. So we yogis got everything covered, like you said.
You guys, just seriously, I got everything covered. But I want to try to trip you up, if you don't mind.
Okay.
And see, maybe, I'm sure you have this covered, but maybe you don't. So why not ask? Do you know what I'm saying? So yoga, you're telling me, is 6,000, maybe 8,000, maybe even 9,000 years old. Okay, people have been practicing yoga for that much time, and it's completely separated essentially from. And people might incorporate yoga into their spiritual lives, but yoga is a standalone thing. It doesn't require a specific belief, or it doesn't require a specific kind of ethnicity or language to practice. But I want to know, even though from our conversation today, we talked a lot about the history of yoga. Tell me about the future of yoga.
I think the future of yoga is so bright, especially now a lot of promotions are happening around the world, even from India itself. There is the International Day of Yoga, which I consider the biggest wellness meet in this universe. People celebrate on 21st of June everywhere around the world, and of course Indian embassies and consulates all over the world do these countries in 1 hour, certain hour where everybody from around the world practice together. The future of yoga, I think, is bright, and I think people are learning more about it. Even we see people in their 60s and 70s come to yoga classes to learn, to study, not only to practice yoga. Because yoga philosophy is, like I told you, universal, and it actually teaches you things you might not learn in schools, and teaches you how to be well, how to feel well, how to control yourself. What I think, even now yoga federations around the world are speaking about making yoga an Olympic game to make the practice sustainable with children and youth, because if there is this element, we celebrate yoga on the global stage in a different way, commitment and real practice.
I'm usually never lost for words. Ask anybody who knows me. But with you today, I am genuinely lost for words, because I wasn't really expecting you to be able to cover all the points so fluidly and with no practice. And so thank you so much, Nouf.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are for sure a yogi of yogis, and we want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing with us your experience. Thank you for opening up to us about your health condition and how yoga personally helped you alleviate and mitigate some of your health issues. And I hope that is useful to all of our listeners. And this is essentially from your generosity, Nouf, that you would share with us and open up to us and be vulnerable with us for the sake of other people. And I find that very admirable.
Thank you so much, Joshua, and thank you for actually giving me the chance to speak to the audience about yoga. This has been my passion, and thank you. Thank you.
I hope to talk to you again soon. Nouf, have a great day.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to Artifact.
Thanks.
Subscribe for more great content right here on Al Ula FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.